I'm CK. Tonight we've got a module from Frequency Central, their Little Melody. It's a sequencer based on a clock divider and some chromatic quantization. Sounds like it's going to have some interesting results. We'll see how much fun it is to put together and then how it sounds. Hope you enjoy the video. Here's the box from Frequency Central in the UK. I purchased this at thonk.co.uk where I purchased many of my eurorack module kits. So it's inside. Okay. We've got some resistors here actually. We've got 3 resistors all twisted together. I wonder why. I don't know. I think I'm going to do this so I don't lose this. I'm going to wrap this like so I know what it's about. Let's see, eurorack cable. Oh golly, lots of pin headers. That'll be interesting. Put that over there and that pin. Bunch of resistors. There's a lot of voltage dividing going on in this. I can sense that already. Let's get the box ready for recycling. And this should have the front panel and the circuit boards, and it does. We've got clock. I don't know what that'll be. Maybe a tap to, we'll see. A preset selector 1 to 8. Reset, which is probably a button. Mode 1 to 8. Value selection. Then all the dividers. Clock in. Preset CV, so you can change that. Reset in. And mode CV, so you can change that. And CV out. That looks reasonably straightforward. Let's look at the board itself. The boards are, of course, good quality. Oh, this designer is Jet Holt and Rick Holt, and the PCB by Johnson Dunn. So let's hold it up to this. So yeah, this looks like a button. That's a pot. That's another button. That's another pot. Then these are all for the pin headers. There's 2 pin header strips along there. Sliders. Some resistors. Pot, 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 pot. LCD, 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 LCD. 2 more LCDs, and these are all jacks, which makes sense. And on the back, we've got our favorite quote of all time. By pressing down a special key, it plays a little melody. Boop, boop, boop. If you don't know what that's from, you need to go find what that's from. It's critical. I think everybody who's watching this channel knows what that's from, but not necessarily. I shouldn't make that assumption. It's been quite a number of decades since that came out. And on the other board, we've got, oops, turn it right way around, op amp, Jetroid tool pick. So this is the controller using the tool platform. Another op amp, power connector, cap, transistor, cap. Oh, here's a trimmer for setting the scale. Some resistors. Oh, here's the 100K 1%. There are 3 of them. That's why those are twisted in there. Resistors, a couple of more transistors. It looks like, and only 2 diodes. Huh, that's interesting. And no circuit protection diode, or even 10R resistor or something like that. That's interesting too. There are 3 diodes, but they're up here. Huh. Doesn't look like it's got a lot to be built, except for a bunch of resistors. Let's see what we have in here. More resistors. And as Frequency Central often does, they put the values of the resistors on the strip. There's transistors, pots, sliders. Let's see how they feel. These even have dust seals on them. Ooh, they feel very smooth, very glidey. That's nice. I'm going to put those over here. Power connector. I'm actually going to dump all this out on my workbench. Double check the bag. Again, paper bags so I can recycle them instead of throwing them out. Very appreciated. More resistors, IC sockets. Should have a bunch of those. Jack. That's the tool, and this is the version 2. There's a note on their website that they updated for that. Diodes, LED, LED. They're all red LEDs, looks like. Here's the op amps kind of all thrown together. Not protecting the op amps very well, are they? Or the chips. Foil caps. Okay, so those presets are not encoders. They're actual resistance type regular pots. Oh, look at how bent up that got in shipping. Huh. We'll fix that later. Knobs with brass set screws. No insert, but brass set screws, so 80% there. Another pot, jacks, jacks, jacks. Flow cap. Electrolytics. Little plastic caps for the sliders. I should have 4 of them. 2, 3. There's the trimmer. More resistors. Big beefy buttons. Big beefy buttons. So yeah, I think this might be tap clock to set the clock. I don't know that for sure. I'm just guessing right now. And panel nuts for the jacks. But looking to see, do I have enough? Did I miss one? 2, 3. I don't know where my 4th slider cap is. I'll look around for it. Double check the inside of the bag, because things can get hung up in the corners. And there it is. Always rip these bags open. Oops. And it just fell on the floor, of course. But there it is. So it looks like a good bit of soldering with all the resistors and all the pin headers, but it'll be good. I'm going to get the soldering iron heated up, get the build guide up, and we will get this thing underway. So we've got the build guide up. It's pretty good. It doesn't have quite as many pictures as I personally like, but that's not a huge knock. It's got enough for us to actually put the thing together. And it is really important to look at this build guide, because the first thing that we do in the build guide is we replace one of the caps, this one, with a jumper. So we'll do this first. Now solder all the diodes and all resistors. You want to do diodes first or resistors first? Oh, we'll do resistors first because that's what we do. We'll put all the 1Ks on first because that's the one we have the most of. So I always personally like to do the most plentiful as the first thing I do. Most plentiful to least. Just a habit of mine. Whether it's building electronics or working on airplanes or writing software, do the thing that's got the most steps first, and your job gets progressively simpler instead of progressively more complicated. So put all these 1Ks in, and first thing we do is see how far we have to bend the leads to get a good... Okay, so we leave about a millimeter of wire away from the center of the body to get them to sit nice and tidy on the board. I did say 1K, didn't I? Yes, I did, and that's what they are. I'm teasing. So resistors are a little... I've talked pretty much about everything one can talk about with putting resistors on. So I will switch the video to fast playback and probably cut out some of this assembly step, because right now, as is typical on my channel, it is resistor time. So almost all the resistors are on, and I put the 4 diodes on also. 3 diodes, whatever. I wanted to come back live just to talk about these 3 resistors, which are also 100K. I mean, there's like 600Ks on here, but these 100Ks are different because their tolerance, margin for error, is at 1% versus 5 or 10. So they're very precise, and I'm assuming that this is where we're getting the basic clock for all of this thing. Let me pull. I kind of wish they hadn't twisted them all, the leads all up like this, but the other thing you might have seen me do was take, there are 4 100K resistors on this board and 3 1K resistors, and I set them aside because I didn't want to solder them on the second board, which is what I would usually do, but as we move through the build and we get to that board, you'll see why I decided not to put those resistors on there yet. What I'm going to do right now is see what the value of these 1% resistors is. It should be, with 1% tolerance, it should be awful close to 100K, shouldn't it? Let's see, let me grab one, or else somebody got ripped off. 100.03, that's not bad. 100.2, depending on how much contact I'm getting with the teeth of the alligator clamps. That's 100.3, or 100.2, I'll call it. Because again, there's a little resistance in these alligator clips. 100.3, good. They are all looking the same and very close to 100. That's 100 point, oh, there we go. Now we got it to 100.3. So they're all pretty much equal. That's really good. Now on the PCB, they are marked with 100K 1%, 100K 1%, and 100K 1%. So you will not have any problem determining where these very precise resistors go. Now we're going to put all the IC sockets on. We'll start in the middle. It's all the sockets, and now we'll do the non-electrolytic caps. Foil caps. I don't see any discs in here. Now we're going to put the transistors on. Do the 547s first. And for these, I don't try and pull them out of the paper. It's too much stress on the component. I just clip them off. Make sure we get them going with the flat side the way it's supposed to go, or else things will be bad. Why do I seem to have 2 more transistors than I need? And, oh yeah, they go on this board. Okay, they do go on the top of this board. So again, we'll set these aside and not install them on the control board yet, since we've got some special stuff we need to do first. And now the voltage regulator, where is that? There we go. Now they want us to do the power connector. Oops, that's a jack, silly person. Where's the power connector? There it is. Now, this is the way it should go according to the silk screen, but as the build guide also recommends, just double check. Make sure the red stripe is by the -12 stripe on the PCB. And now we'll do the electrolytic caps. 10 microfarad. They use a square pad and a plus sign for where the positive or long lead goes, which is very nice. So 47, all 50 volt parts, which leaves a lot of margin on a eurorack board. Now the trimmer and the PCB very clearly shows you where the screw is. Now comes the error-prone part for me, which is getting the pin headers cut right. Now, male pin headers are relatively easy because you're not going to lose a pin. Now, let me double check these to make sure they are actually, I've got a pin in each hole. I cut them right length. Yep, in fact I cut this one too long, so I can cut off one more pin. And that is the main board. I'm going to go through it all now and double check all my solder connections. And it's all done. So we'll put this board aside and we'll go over to the control board. And here it's quite important to follow this sequence. We're going to put the board on a flat surface, and we're going to take the two tactile switches into their solder pads, but we're not going to push them all the way through. We're just going to kind of put them on there. So we're not going to go through the holes. I think it's because if we went all the way through, they wouldn't be tall enough to reach through the front panel. So this is what they're telling us to do. And we're going to solder these on the front of the board, not the back of the board. And since they're not completely through the hole, you gotta be a little bit careful. I'm sorry, I got a tool in the way. I was sloppy. You gotta be careful to not move it too much. See, like right there. I think I can keep it somewhat pressed down with my ring finger. Get one leg down. Now it's not going to go anywhere. We'll do that with the reset button too. And again, because these are through-hole plated. Now, before I do anything else, I'm going to drop the control panel on them and make sure. Well, that didn't make any sense. That was soldered. Huh. I'm going to drop the. See, that doesn't fit. So this moved a little bit on me. Now, does that fit? Okay, that will fit horizontally and vertically. Now, I'll just solder the rest of these legs so they're secure in the other plane, in the Z plane. It's a little bit of a pain to do it this way, but he probably couldn't find the right. You couldn't find a good push-button switch that was the right height to go with probably the sliders, because I think the sliders will be defining the total height of the distance of the board from the front panel, because there's always one component or component set that determines the distance. I hooked that a little bit. That determines the distance between the circuit board, the control board, and the front panel. And in this case, I believe it is these tactile switches. I think I may have moved that one too much. Before I go any further, I'll double check it. No, that'll be good. There's a lot of slop around these buttons, which is good. The holes are not too tightly drilled. It's got a couple of almost, I'd say, a millimeter, millimeter and a half around, which is nice. May not make the best close-up beauty shot, but when you're using it in your studio or in a club, you'll appreciate them not binding. The other day I did a kit where I really had to get a circular file and round out a hole. I'm double checking here to make sure. I got solder on my... left some dimples in the polyurethane I cover my workbench with, but that's okay. I probably need to do another coat of poly on that. So anyway, so as I look at the back, I can see all the solder has flowed through all the holes, so that's good. And I look at the front and give it a little wiggle. Feels secure all the way around, and I can see that the legs are all connected. So that's the tricky part on this board. Now we'll go back to regular stuff. We'll do the 3 resistors that we saved from before, and again, the reason why we didn't want to get these resistors in right now is primarily because they would have been here and here, and that could have interfered with us getting the tactile push-button switches positioned the way they should be. So we'll go fast through these resistors. And now the 2 transistors. Okay, he wants us to do the pots and the sockets now, and then the female headers. I guess that makes sense, because the pots are up here, the sockets are down here, so if you were to put the female headers on first, like so, and then you were trying to solder the back of the jacks, you might get some interference with the header. Same thing with the pots, because the pot leads are right up against the header. So we'll go ahead and do that then. I like to do things that make sense. So these are 1000 k ohm up. Pins are a little bit bent. Not too bad, but a little bit. And while I'm doing this, I'm going to take the panel nuts off them. Now the jacks. There's a lot of slop in the cutout for the jack legs, so we're going to have to put the panel on to make sure these are all aligned correctly before we solder anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of these panel nuts for these potentiometers up here and screw it down onto the board just finger tight, and then flip it over and hold this jack support it with my finger behind the board so it's flush against the circuit board and do one leg of that, and then use one of its panel nuts to secure this so everything is snug before I solder. Everything's snug, so I'll go ahead and solder these sockets all in. Now I'll take these panel nuts back off. As I got to get another pair of pliers for these female pin headers. And as is typical with female pin headers, you are going to lose one pin when you cut them. So that's hanging off the side a little bit. I didn't cut it quite flush with the edge of the circuit board, so I've got a little piece of sandpaper here. That'll be good enough. And as we did with the male headers, let me double check all those to make sure I didn't bridge any of them, and I did not. Now we're going to do the sliders and the plastic pots. Now, as you'll notice on the board, he's very specific that these are Sanghui SL3015N B 100K sliders, so they really want you to use a very specific part from a specific manufacturer to make sure this all works well. These are really grippy too. I'm not going to have to support those in any way while I do this. It is well nigh impossible to put these in the wrong way, but if you are careless and don't notice you're squishing pins, you could theoretically do it the wrong way. That leg is bent. And I sure as heck don't have any spares of these. Sorry folks, I let the cameras time out. They go for 30 minutes and then they'll kick out, and I usually recycle them before that. But I didn't, and I don't really know where we stopped recording. But we've got the sliders on, and I'll edit this to where we actually are. Got the sliders on, the plastic handle pots on, got the LEDs lightly sitting in their holes with the leads uncut. Now, to make sure everything is nice and pretty, and actually for final, because once I put this on, I will not have to take it off again. The only remaining thing I have to do is put the ICs in their sockets, and they're on the other board, so I can finalize the positioning of this board right now. Main thing I care about is making sure these sliders don't rub. Okay, now I'm going to solder all the actually I'm going to poke the LEDs through their respective holes. And now I can solder everything else up. Now again, I'm going to check all my connections. Yep, there's one. I missed one support leg, 2 support legs. That would not have been disastrous, but again, that's why we check. And that's good. Now I'm going to put the ICs in the logic board. Check all the pins. All the pins look good. We'll mate the two boards. All the pins are in and flush. Get the power cable. That's in. So, now we just put in the knobs, and that's a flathead. And there it is. There's the front. Everything works. There's the side. There's the back. Other side, top, and bottom. So she's ready to go in the test rack and get calibrated and set up. We've got the module in the rack, and the first thing to do is to calibrate it, and the guidance is to move these full anti-clockwise or counterclockwise and have all the sliders up, and we should be getting 5 volts on the CV out, or it's already at 4.947, so I don't know whether it really needs calibration or whether I'm going to be able to get that to change much. I gotta see what the heck I'm doing here. Let's see if I can get at this trimmer. Okay, we're in the slot on the trimmer. Okay, I'm getting it, turning it up, and it's going up slowly, very slowly. But I am making progress. Back a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. Oops, came out of the slot. Of course it came out of the slot just when I was almost done. So there's 5 volts. And that's the only adjustment or calibration that this unit requires. So I will turn the cameras back off and reconfigure for actually running the thing. Well, let's see what this thing does. So I'm using the Division 6 sequencer to give clock or gate to the little melody and to the more VCA, both from Frequency Central, feeding a Befaco even VCO, and on the scope, the top yellow line is note CV, the bottom line, magenta line, is the actual pulses coming out of the thing. So let's fire it up. I turn on the sequencer. So this, these knobs change the division per clock. Again, you should probably read the manual on this because I will not be doing it justice. So effectively you can see how many, it depends on how many pulses each position is going to give based on a particular clock. Now the sliders set note value. Now the preset should change the ramping, but I don't know if you're going to be able to tell. And this is mod, of course, or mode. And the sliders are supposed to be full 5 octave. I'm going to do something else. I'm going to plug an LFO into the mode. I haven't done this before. Now I'm going to plug the LFO into the preset. I'm going to plug the LFO into, and the reason why you're still hearing something is because the sequencer gate is still going to the VCA. Now I'm going to plug Note CV into the LFO, I mean the clock into the LFO. Going very fast. Too fast. Now it's basically not triggering at all. Let me put the sequencer back in as the trigger. If I can figure out where that chord is. Come on. There it is. Reset at any time. So that's what she does. Pretty interesting unit. Again, messing with the controls on the fly give you very interesting results. And if you play with it a lot more and read through the manual in depth, you'll see the relationship between these division selectors and the presets and the mode. Again, it's more than I want to go through in the concluding demo here, but it's a good unit. I can see using it for a lot of things. So go out and get one. And I hope you enjoyed the video.